this video, I want to talk about the last major issue in the interwar era, and that is the road to World War II, between 1933 and 1939. While World War I is more complex, there's not necessarily a very clear-cut guilty party for the start of the war, though Germany and Austria share the bulk of the blame. When it comes to the Second World War, it's pretty easy to know who started this war, and well, it's Nazi Germany and in Asia, Japan. And so I want to just briefly go over the road to World War II. It's a lot more direct and straightforward than the road to World War I. And I've included on Canvas the slides here. And so, yeah, I just want to kind of go over things, kind of want to add some more color to what I've written there, but let's get into the causes of World War II. And so in a previous video, I set up the Paris Peace Conference and the international order it created. And well, basically what happens on the road to World War II is that Germany, Italy, and Japan slowly and successfully challenge that international political order we established in Paris in 1919. Mussolini, Il Duce, wants to try to expand Italy's control. Again, Mussolini as a fascist is also a social Darwinist. We need to show the Italian nation is strong. And so again, we've seen this issue before. How do you show how great your nation is? Engaged in imperialism. And well, Mussolini is going to look to expand Italy's empire. Japan also has been an imperialist power ever since the late 19th century and the Meiji Reform era. And well, now it wants to continue expanding into Manchuria and to China. Hitler is also going to engage in imperialism, and though Lebensraum is actually a concept going back to late 19th century Germany, the Nazis will embrace Lebensraum, and Hitler will embrace Lebensraum. And so Hitler has the long-term goal here, we keep this in the back of our mind, Hitler's long-term goal is to achieve Lebensraum, to invade Poland and Western Russia, clear those areas out of Poles and Slavs, or subjugate them, and recolonize Germans there. And so step by step, Hitler is also going to challenge the Versailles Treaty. The Weimar Republic had agreed to the Versailles Treaty. They agreed to a lot of terms that a lot of Germans considered rather tough and humiliating. And well, Hitler's made a career now on attacking the Versailles Treaty. He wants to make Germany a great country again and unite all Germans. So based on that nationalism, we need to try to bring all Germans under Hitler's Third Reich. And so all three of these countries will begin to challenge the world we created in 1919. Well, who's there to stop them? And ultimately, nobody. Great Britain, France, the US, and the League of Nations didn't ultimately act decisively against these violations and acts of aggression. Great Britain and France, and I can't stress this enough, looking back at the start of World War II, it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback and go, well, the British and French should have, stood up to Hitler. But again, nobody wanted to risk another world war, and this is why I spent so much time in previous videos going over the casualty rates and emphasizing just how unique the First World War was by that point. And well, a lot of British and French policymakers will go, again, we don't want Hitler to do these things, but do we really want to wage another devastating world war? Do we really want millions of our young soldiers, our young men, to die and be wounded from another epic conflict? Is it really worth it? No. And especially because, again, both Great Britain and France are also dealing with the effects of the Great Depression. So it's not like anybody has a lot of cash to go and spend on war, because as we know at this point, wars always are expensive. No one has the real cash right now and the political will to wage another epic conflict to maintain the international order established at the Paris Peace Conference. So Great Britain and France do not really want to risk another world war. The League of Nations is not going to be effective. Again, ultimately, the U.S. doesn't take part in it, and the League of Nations doesn't have any real teeth. The League of Nations can only do so much if its member countries actually want to do something. And so the League of Nations can serve as a forum, it can serve as an arena to discuss and resolve issues, but if its member countries don't actually want to do anything about it, they're not. And so the League of Nations is going to be ineffective ultimately at maintaining peace without US and other major powers really playing a major role in this. And speaking of the U.S. not playing a role, the U.S. is officially going to remain isolationist. Not that the U.S. isn't talking to other people around the world, but the U.S. doesn't really want to get involved in issues around the world. There are, of course, people who oppose American isolationism. For example, Theodore Seuss Geisel, more popularly known as Dr. Seuss, will, in the pre-World War II years, create a bunch of cartoons basically criticizing American isolationism. And so you have the one here in the middle, famous one. There's the U.S. in bed. What a lucky thing we've got separate beds. And so while Europe is being torn apart by Hitleritis and Stalinich and Nazi fever and fascist fever, at the bottom it says, ho-hum, no chance of contagion. So it looks like the U.S. is isolated from the problems of Europe, but notice the beds are really close. And well, those diseases could easily spread over to the U.S. Here, after the start of World War II, the US is this bird sitting in a tree, ho-hum. When he's finished pecking down that last tree, he'll quite likely be tired. So as Nazi Germany goes and takes down all these countries, no, we'll be fine. Again, the cartoon criticizing this and saying, no, we're not going to be fine. And here on the bottom left, you have America First. You have here a figure representing the isolationists in the US, and the grandma's reading the story to her children, Adolf the Wolf. And the wolf chewed up the children and spit out their bones, but those were foreign children, and it really didn't matter. And so with that, again, we can't ignore Dr. Seuss is pointing out here the threat on the other side of the Atlantic. Hitler has made a career. He's obtained power by criticizing the Versailles Treaty, which was so humiliating to us Germans. Well, in the first few years after he takes over, he begins slowly challenging those things that Germany wasn't supposed to do. For example, 1935, he basically announces to the world, again, Germany's building up a big military again. We're going to build an air force. We're going to build a tank force, things that the Germans weren't allowed to do. And well, what does the international community say? All right, that's bad, but are we going to do anything about it? No. The Germans, they can have a bigger military, whatever. And then in 1936, Hitler's going to send troops into the Rhineland. German troops now will march across the Rhine River and begin stationing themselves in Western Germany. Again, this was something else that the Versailles Treaty said Germany couldn't do. France is not really thrilled about this, but the British say, whatever. I mean, come on, they're German troops in German territory. What could go wrong? And France is basically going to have to back down from this. And so, once again, the Allies don't do anything as Hitler begins to push the boundaries and test the Versailles Treaty and whether the Allies will really stand up to defend it. And so here's cartoon I began with, Hitler there marching across the backs of these spineless leaders of democracy, stepping stones to glory, as he basically flaunts all these rules and regulations that Germany was supposed to adhere to on his way to becoming the boss of the universe. And so again, there's criticism for the Allies not standing up to Germany, and there's of course a lot of debate about, if the Allies had stood up to Germany in 1935, 1936, at what point could Hitler have actually backed off? But ultimately, again, Britain and France don't really want to risk another world war. In the 1930s, there's some other things going on, and so Mussolini, inspired by imperialism, will launch a successful invasion of Ethiopia. As we've gone over before, Ethiopia was the one place in Africa that maintained indigenous rule. They weren't ruled by Europeans. They weren't dominated in some way or heavily influenced by Europeans. They were actually quite independent after fighting off the Italians back in the late 19th century. But now Mussolini is here. He's with Italian troops, and Italian troops now will conquer Ethiopia and add Ethiopia to Italy's empire. What does the international community say? Nothing. The Emperor of Ethiopia goes to the League of Nations, and well, Italy bad, and well, that's about it. In the late 1930s, Spain devolves into a civil war. Spanish political history is kind of unique in Europe and doesn't really follow the same track as the rest of Europe. But what's going to happen in 1936 is that the military is going to overthrow the Spanish Republic. And well, the military is going to establish an authoritarian state. Which again, as I stressed in a previous video, this is what's typically happening across many parts of Central and Eastern Europe. Republics are falling and being replaced by authoritarian states. But now in Spain, there's a brutal civil war. On one side, you have literally the right wing. You have conservatives and fascists in Spain uniting together, and they're supported militarily by Germany and Italy. Germany and Italy will both see the Spanish Civil War as a way to kind of test out new military tactics, test out new military weapons. And so notice the Spanish city here completely leveled by aerial bombing from German bombers. On the other side, you have the Republicans, which is the left wing. Liberals, socialists, and communists will put aside their differences and unite to defend the Spanish Republic. And well, they're going to be supported by the USSR because the communists form part of the Republican coalition. The Soviets will back the communists of Spain. But Great Britain, France, and the US all remain neutral. There will be volunteers from the US and other countries that will go to fight alongside Spanish Republicans, but otherwise, the British, French, and American governments do not want to get involved in this conflict. And ultimately, the military will win, the right wing will win, and there'll be a conservative authoritarian dictatorship under General Francisco Franco in Spain until the 1970s. And originally, Mussolini did not care for Hitler. But in 1936, Mussolini has his imperialist nationalist agenda, Hitler has his imperialist nationalist agenda, and given the weakness of the British and French governments to do anything about what Germany and Mussolini are doing in the world and in Europe, Germany and Italy now will become allies. Mussolini and Hitler will form what is called the Axis power. The idea being that there is an axis between Berlin and Rome, their capitals, around which the world will spin. And so 1936, we have the alliance between Germany and Italy, and after World War II begins in 1940, Japan is going to join that alliance to form formally the three Axis powers that the US and others will fight in the Second World War. And so Germany has Italy as an ally. Britain and France have not stopped Germany's violations of the Versailles Treaty. And so now Hitler is going to become even bolder in challenging Versailles, the British, and the French governments. And so in 1938, in March, and there's going to be this theme of basically Hitler does a lot of things in March every year, but in March of 1938, Hitler now announces the Anschluss, Germany's annexation of Austria. Anschluss is just basically German for annexation, but specifically referring to the annexation of Austria. Thinking back to the revolutions of 1848 and German nationalism, again, we want a German nation state, German nationalists said, of all German speakers into one government. And well, we've had little Austria here. Those Austrian Germans were not allowed to be part of Germany as a result of the Versailles Treaty. So those Germans of Austria had their own state while the Germans of Germany had theirs. And well, what Hitler basically wants is Großdeutschland, big Germany. And well, it's kind of complicated, but ultimately he's going to engineer the German takeover of Austria. There's been the growth of a Nazi party within Austria itself, an Austrian Nazi party. There's an Austrian Nazi chancellor after the previous conservative dictator was assassinated. But in 1938, Hitler is going to invade. Troops will cross the border. And so here's Hitler entering his hometown, Braunau am Inn, along the border with Germany. German troops lifting up the barricade there at the border. Hitler will arrive in Vienna. He'll drive through the streets of Vienna and ultimately appear at the Heldenplatz, the Heroes Plaza in Vienna. It's still there today. And at the newest branch of the Hofburg Palace that the Habsburgs had built just before World War I, Hitler on this balcony here will announce that Austria is being annexed to the Third Reich in Nazi Germany. And well, notice the crowd there. There are a lot of Austrian Germans who are ecstatic about this. There are also Austrian Germans who aren't ecstatic about this. And so if you've seen the movie The Sound of Music, behind the whole romance family story is the political story of Germany's annexation of Austria, the Anschluss. And so you have the father of the family tearing up the Nazi flag because he didn't want the Nazis to take over Austria. And so we need to give this takeover of Austria some sense of legitimacy. And so the next month in April, there will be a plebiscite, a vote of the people. And I've shown you this before, actually, with the revolutions 1848. And so say yes on April 10th to Großdeutschland, big Germany. And here's the ballot, the people's vote for the Greater German Reichstag. So go ahead and you agree with the reunification of Austria with the German Empire and its leadership under the Führer, Adolf Hitler. Notice the ja, the yes, is a lot bigger than 9, the no. But there's this whole campaign. Notice what looks to be a streetcar here. Step by step, Hitler destroys the dictated peace of Versailles. Therefore, say yes on April 10th. Notice outside this building here, in German, same blood belongs in the same empire. And so back to German nationalism. The German race should all be part of the same state. Austria now turns home. And well, this poster here on the left, 1806, you had the fall of the Holy Roman Empire, so the Germans were no longer united. In 1848, you had the failure of the nationalist revolution of 1848. Germans weren't united. In 1918, the treaties of Versailles and Saint-Germain said that Germany and Austria couldn't unite. But now, 1938, the return home of German Austria to the Greater German Reich is being done. And so vote on April 10th, yes, one people, one empire, one Führer. And well, surprise, the vast majority of Austrians vote for the Anschluss. After World War II, there will be this myth that the Austrians were the first victims of Nazi Germany, but you can't deny that a lot of Austrian Germans wanted to be part of Nazi Germany. And so here on April 12th, after the vote, the plebiscite has passed, you have a British newspaper publishing this cartoon about the plebiscite. Do you approve of having your pants kicked? Vote yes or else. And well, here are Nazi officials with the ja votes there. So you get your ja here to put the ja there. And well, Mussolini's there with a pillow on his butt ready to be kicked. And there you have the leaders of France and Great Britain about to be kicked. And well, Britain and France are not going to do anything about the Anschluss, another big violation of the Treaty of Versailles. And, well, now in 1938, Hitler is going to push for another annexation. And now we're going to have, finally, the British and French step in. In 1938, we have what's called the Sudetenland crisis. Hitler's going to demand the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. And I've talked about the Sudetenland in a previous video. You have had, since the Middle Ages, German families living in this border region here of Bohemia, and under the Habsburg Empire, again, because the Germans dominated Austria, the Germans of Bohemia were the majority. But now, Czechoslovakia, the Czech-Slovak Slavic state, has been formed, and the Allies wouldn't let the Sudeten Germans join Germany after World War I. And now, Sudeten Germans don't like being underneath the Slavic Czechs ruling from Prague any longer, and well, the Sudeten Germans want to join Germany. And so Hitler demands that Czechoslovakia turn over this German majority region. And now the British and French say, stop Hitler, we have to talk about this. And so in September, we'll have the Munich Conference. The leaders of Britain, France, Germany, and Italy will now all get together to decide the fate of the Sudetenland and Czechoslovakia. The Czechs will protest in Prague, and notice who's not there. Edvard Beneš, the Prime Minister of Czechoslovakia, wasn't invited to this meeting to decide the future of Czechoslovakia. And well, at this conference, Neville Chamberlain is a major proponent of appeasement. To appease somebody is to make them happy. And well, Chamberlain's big idea is that, look, if we just let Hitler take what he wants, just keep Hitler happy, we're going to avoid a world war. And so, of course, now looking back after World War II, Chamberlain's name has become synonymous with appeasement. If you're a Chamberlain, you want to give in to somebody knowing it's going to lead to trouble. But again, the British and the British government under Chamberlain didn't want to risk a world war. We want to fight over the Sudeten Germans? Like, come on, do we really want to sacrifice British lives for that? They're Germans, just let Hitler have the Sudetenland. But Chamberlain gets Hitler to promise that Hitler wouldn't demand anything else. And so ultimately, the French Prime Minister will go along with the British. Again, the French did not want to act on their own without British support. And now Hitler will be able to take over the Sudetenland. Chamberlain goes back to London, and he arrives at the airport. And I'm going to put a clip of the video of this below, because what I want you to notice how ecstatic people are that we've avoided another war in Europe. Chamberlain lands and speaks to the media. The settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is in my view only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace. I believe it is peace for our time. Go home and get a nice quiet sleep. And so he comes back, the crowd's ecstatic that we've avoided war in Europe again, everything's cool, but it's not going to be. Over in the Sudetenland, German troops cross the border. Sudeten Germans are ecstatic, just like the German Austrians were. All these double language signs of towns in both Czech and in German. Notice the guy here is painting over the Czech. Nope, this is now part of Germany. Let's get rid of that Slavic stuff. This famous photograph here on the right, she looks like she's sad and is forced to lift up her arm in salute of Hitler. But when you look at the rest of the photo, no, she's not crying tears of sadness, she's crying tears of joy, because now all Germans are united, and there's the Fuhrer, and he's going to lead the Germans to glory, etc., etc., etc. A couple of postcards here. The Sudetenland is frei, the Sudetenland is free, and now Germany has joined the Sudetenland and Austria to it. We thank our leader, we thank our Fuhrer, and here the Sudetenland is becoming part of Germany. And so there is our map of Germany after the Munich Conference. And well, Hitler promised he wouldn't go after anything else, that he was satisfied, he wouldn't demand anything else, and well, he's going to end up breaking his promise. Once again, Hitler's doing something in March, and well, in March of 1939, Hitler is going to invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. German troops will arrive in the capital of Prague, and the Czechoslovakian state will collapse. Our last liberal democratic country in Central and Eastern Europe will fall now to the Nazi state. And so Hitler here shoving Czechoslovakia into a meat grinder into the Reich. Notice that in compensation for this, Poland's going to get a little border territory here they wanted. Hungary's going to get back some territory from Slovakia it wanted. And the Slovak Republic will become basically a Nazi puppet state. And Nazi Germany will take over these regions of Bohemia and Moravia. And so there is our map of Europe now. By March of 1939, Germany has grown. It's taken over the German inhabited areas of Austria and Sudetenland. It's destroyed Czechoslovakia. But keep in the back of your mind, Hitler's ultimate objective is to gain Lebensraum. He has his eyes set on Poland. And so if we're going to finally undo the terms of the Treaty of Versailles and we're going to take on Poland, we need to start talking to the USSR, the Soviet Union. Remember, we had that Polish corridor to give Poland access to the sea, created in 1919 at the Paris Peace Conference, and now Hitler will begin planning for the invasion of Poland. And to everyone's surprise, in August of 1939, the Nazi and Soviet governments announced that they have signed a German-Soviet non-aggression pact. It's formally called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact after the Soviet and Nazi foreign ministers, but the Germans and the Soviets publicly declare that they're going to be neutral toward one another. And this is an absolute shock to people in the world, because remember, as I said in previous videos, Hitler has made his career fighting communists and denouncing communism, using communism to gain power and the fear of communism to gain power. Fascists are no friends of communists, and vice versa. Stalin hates fascists, and so do other communists throughout Europe. And so publicly they announced they're going to be neutral toward one another, but there's a secret plan. At some point, they're going to divide Poland and the Baltic states. And so notice the map on the left here. At some point, they're going to split Eastern Europe. Germany's going to take western parts of Poland and Lithuania. The Soviets will get Estonia, Latvia, half of Poland, a little bit of Romania there, and Finland. So that's the grand plan ultimately. The Nazis and the Soviets agreeing to divide up Eastern Europe. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania were all new countries created at the Paris Peace Conference in the name of nationalism. Again, we have a nation-state for Estonians, a nation-state for Latvians, a nation-state for Lithuanians. The Finns also had their own country, but now the Soviets would like to take these areas that were once part of the Russian Empire. And so with that, Hitler now has secured a temporary peace and a peace deal and a secret plan with the Soviet Union. And with this in his back pocket, Hitler now will turn to Poland. And so Hitler is going to demand Poland in September 1939 return the city of Danzig to Germany and allow access through the Polish corridor. And so remember, we formed that Polish corridor. This is an area of Poland originally until Prussia annexed this and the partitions of Poland. And back in the 1770s, there are still some Germans here in Poland. And well, the city of Danzig is vastly a German-speaking city. Danzig's history is a little complicated. Not going to get into it. But Hitler now wants the Polish corridor here returned to Germany so that East Prussia and the rest of Germany could be directly united once more. And now Britain and France, they've stepped aside, they've trusted Hitler, they've then got an egg on their face, and well, now Britain and France promise to support Poland. The British and French were hoping states like Czechoslovakia would help them counter German aggression in the future, and well, they've given up on Czechoslovakia, and so no, we're going to stand behind you, Poland, and well, if Germany, you invade Poland, we're going to have trouble. And well, on September 1st, 1939, World War II will begin. Germany will launch its invasion of Poland, and well, 2 days later, Britain and France now finally declare war on Germany. As German troops begin to invade Poland, and I'll get back to that in a later video, Neville Chamberlain will take to the airwaves to tell the British public, "You can imagine what a bitter blow it is to me that all my long struggle to win peace has failed. Yet I cannot believe that there is anything more or anything different that I could have done and that would have been more successful. Up to the very last, it would have been quite possible to have arranged a peaceful and honorable settlement between Germany and Poland, but Hitler would not have it." And so the Western Allies have sought to avoid a world war. They didn't want a repeat of World War I. They thought the policy of appeasement would eventually make Hitler happy and maintain peace in Europe, but that's failed. And so in my next video, I'll get into the beginning of World War II, the second phase of our great 30 Years' War of the 20th century.